Did you hear about the hopping competition between the hundreds of frogs? They decided to have a race to see who could make it to the top of this very, very high tower. And so they started out, the gun went off, they started hopping up these stairs to get to the top of the tower. But it was a long way, and the crowd gathered to cheer on all of the contestants that were involved. But you know, they started to notice that that was an awfully high tower, and that was a difficult thing to accomplish for a frog to climb up all those stairs. And they would call out and say, "Oh, that is so difficult." And sure enough, some of the frogs started dropping out of the race. Of course, the crowd continued to cheer. They said, "Oh, that is so difficult. That is so hard. Can any frog make it?" And sure enough, more frogs dropped out of the race. They gave up until there were only just a few frogs left climbing to the top of that tower. The crowd yelled, "Oh, those steps are so high. It's so difficult. In fact, the sun is shining and it's hot. It's getting harder all the time. They're going to have to turn back." Sure enough, more frogs gave up. Except for one. One kept going and made it all the way to the top, and the crowd just cheered and cheered and cheered. And finally, when he made it all the way back down, they couldn't help but ask, "How did you do it? How were you the only frog that made it all the way to the top?" Do you know what he said? Eh? You see, that frog was deaf, and it kept climbing and climbing despite what was being said below him. And I think there's an interesting lesson from that hopping frog. You know, we need to turn a deaf ear to the negative things that happen around us, to those people that would affect us in a negative way, certainly to this world that wants to drag us down and pull us away from the heights that God wants us to reach. We need to turn a deaf ear to that. We need to listen to God. In fact, there's a proverb that connects with this. If you were to look into the Proverbs, Proverbs chapter 8 and verse 32, here's what it says. "Now, therefore, listen to me, my children, for blessed are those who keep my ways." You see, that's what God says. That's who we need to be listening to. We need to ignore the pulls, the sin, the draws of this world, turn a deaf ear to that, and let's tune in to God and always have that ear tuned in to the voice of our great Creator. That's BT Daily. We'll see you next time.